Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Moneypenny, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Your Painkiller for 2021 Payment Workflow Enhancements. Today, two MHA partnered organizations have joined forces to collaborate and present to you the content for this webinar, including how to streamline your payment workflow, discussing autopay enrollments, HSA card ingesting, and PCI compliance. Our guest speakers today are Jamie Timmons, Regional Sales Manager at Etactics, and Zach Gleason, Senior Sales Manager at BillingTree. Etactics is a software company headquartered in the greater Cleveland area that provides revenue cycle management services and solutions to over 4,000 healthcare providers, pharmacies, and commercial entities. BillingTree empowers customers with a competitive advantage by supplying the billing and receivables process to numerous healthcare providers and pharmacies through PCI Level 1 compliant gateways. Jamie and Zach have worked together for over a decade with a combined 26 years experience in the payment industry. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie.
Thanks, Matt. Great introduction. I appreciate that. Again, my name is Jamie Timmons. I work with Etactics. And what we're going to focus on today is the payment workflow. And what I want to focus on is that really starts with the bills that you're sending out to your patients. Once you've submitted your insurance claims, you now need to collect on the balance of that private pay. And this is really where you can start to make a difference in improving your workflow, and that, of course, leads to improving your cash flow. So you need to ask yourself, how many calls are you getting after sending your bills out? Because your patients might be confused on what they owe. I know this is something that I hear all the time because the bills might not be clear or concise, and ultimately they aren't easy to understand once they're in the hands of those patients. So again, are they causing confusion? Are they triggering those phone calls? And all of those are going to lead to delaying the payment. Obviously, if you have confused patients, they're going to be calling you, they're going to be asking questions, and they're only going to do that when they have the time to do it, or the patients to do it for that matter, and that is going to just ultimately delay that payment. So we certainly want to focus on getting that payment in quicker and really opening up that cash flow for you. In 2019, 70% of consumers were confused by their medical bills. So I'm sure that's something that you may get, especially in the long-term care pharmacy space. You may hear that quite often from your patients. Therefore, you need to practice a patient-friendly billing if you're going to capture those private pay patients and help increase your cash flow in a timely manner. So let's look at some things that can help make your statements less confusing and help increase your cash flow. And the number one thing I always recommend is removing aging buckets from your statements. So you might want to ask, why are we going to remove those aging buckets? Maybe you think you're being transparent with your patients on where their account stands, or maybe it's just the way your statements print out from your pharmacy management softwares. However, what happens is when you get these statements, or when a patient gets those statements, it's not really communicating well with them, even though this says that it's in a current status. They see these aging buckets, and what that really is communicating is that you're tracking the aging of the account, but they have plenty of time to pay that before it ever gets out of the aging cycle. So removing these aging buckets and not showing that to them is a really great way to start to improve that process. But it does let the patient think they have more time to pay off what they owe. So we really need to make sure that they understand that when you say that the payment is due by a due date, that that's really what it is that you mean. So let's look at how else you can improve your workflow and the receivables process. Communicate consistently through the receivables process. And what I mean by that is, if you're doing any type of communication, whether that's on your statements, whether that's sending out letters or making phone calls. Do it consistently, do it uniformly, not necessarily just when you have time to do it. When you're not doing it consistently, that makes it look as if you aren't keeping track. So you want to try to automate that process in some way. It's easy to fall into doing things when we have time, especially when there isn't an automated process in place. You know, we have busy times of the years, we have slower times of the year or the month, things like that. So try to coincide those times that you might have downtime to do that consistently with your patients. Using a process that's driven towards results makes it easier to achieve those goals. And using the aging of accounts to help with that communication. So rather than showing the aging buckets, we want to go ahead and use those aging buckets to trigger action. For example, changing messages on the statements based on the aging of the account is going to draw more reaction when displaying those aging buckets. So in this instance, this might be a current status for a patient. So as opposed to showing aging buckets saying that this is current, we display a message here that says payment due now, and a little bit of information here as well. Whereas, let's say if this is in 60 days, or maybe it's at 90 days, we can change that message to reflect that. So rather than jumping to the second or to the third bucket or box, if you will, we change this to say final notice. Using color to your advantage, using fonts to your advantage as well to really help to communicate what it is that you're trying to get across to those patients. Those are also all things that you should take advantage of. Additionally, as I had mentioned earlier, communicating consistently if you're doing letters, sending letters out, automating those letters is a great way to effectively communicate with your patients. If you're sending letters out separate from your statements, I would certainly suggest that that's something that you start sending together in one envelope. Typically what happens is if somebody's getting a letter separate from that statement, it's generally going to trigger a phone call because you've just sent a letter referencing a past due balance, and now they want to get a copy of their statement. Some of you may be nodding your heads because you've run into this before. And what happens then, you have to run off that statement once again. You have that manual process, and then you have to fold it and print it, fold it, additional postage, and then that additional mailing time for them to get that. So again, we're just drawing out that receivables process, and what we really want to do is streamline it. Additionally, you can automate phone calls. If you're calling for past due balances, this is something that you should do consistently. So not just when you have time. If you're calling it 30 days or 60 days, make sure you're doing that to everybody and make sure you're doing it consistently on a monthly basis. Not just when it's convenient for you. Possibly texting may be another option. However, again, you want to do this on a consistent basis and for whoever it might be convenient for. While most of you may have a more elderly demographic, it may be caseworkers or adult children who are taking care of the accounts. Therefore, the text messages or emails may be a more favored way of communication. So that's things you need to ask. Maybe the phone calls aren't working, but text messages might. So once you get the type of communication or the style of communication that works best for them, you're going to get a better reaction or better communication. Now we're going to look at delivery options. The more options you give the patients and their families, the more opportunity you're giving them to remit that payment in a timely manner. So do you give them options for delivery? Printing and mailing is, of course, always an option, one that I'm sure you're taking advantage of today. However, as I just mentioned, you have to look at who is taking care of the accounts. Is it is it maybe that elderly person in a home care facility, or is it an adult child that might be taking care of the accounts? So maybe electronic delivery options or a patient portal where there could be access to multiple accounts for, let's say, a facility or that adult child may benefit that person. So if, let's say, I'm an adult child, it might behoove me to have an electronic portal that I could log in and I can get both mom and dad's statements. And of course, again, you want to keep in mind who's paying the bill. Is it the resident who's going to be happy with just sending in their check each month with a personal note, which is sometimes the case. I've heard that quite often as well. Sometimes they like to put a little smiley face or, a little note because I know that they can too become like family to us. Or is it the family member who is juggling a young family of their own and their aging parents, and they just want to get things as streamlined as possible? So these are all things that we need to keep in mind. So just to review, in some ways you can enhance your payment flow. And I know that pharmacy management softwares don't always give the flexibility that we've discussed today, but sometimes reaching out to a third-party vendor can help you to create these workflows to your advantage. But you want to make your bills understandable, clear, and concise so patients know where their account stands and what their next steps should be. 1/4 of Americans don't pay their bills on time. And I mean, that's a large number. That's just not healthcare, that's across the board. So you need to do what you can to capture the self-pay as quickly and effectively as you can. Offer multiple delivery options that work for the responsible party. Not everyone's going to be okay with printing and mailing everything. And obviously not everyone's going to be okay with just electronic delivery. 65% of consumers prefer to receive their bills through a combination of both online and paper. And 57% of people would consider switching to an alternative financial organization or service provider if they forced their customers to go paperless. Again, this is the reason you need to be able to offer options to satisfy the masses. Lastly, I want to review some payment options. Now that we've gone over streamlining payment workflow as it pertains to statements, what payment options do you accept and do they work for your clients? Are you a cash-only pharmacy, cash and check? In 2018, checks made up 16.8% of bill payment methods and cash made up 5.5%. Do you accept credit cards? And if you do accept these credit cards, are you putting that on your bills that are getting sent out? Do they know that you accept credit cards or what credit cards that you do accept? Do you offer online payments or mobile-friendly options when it comes to payments? 43% of bills were paid electronically in 2018. And you can imagine with the way the world is today that that percentage has only gone up. And here's the big one. Do you offer autopay, or I realize you can't see me, but I am doing air quotes with auto pay because I'm sure there's at least a handful of you out there that have your patients who ask you to keep their accounts and to auto pay, and again in air quotes, each time their statement is generated, so they don't have to worry about sending you that payment every month. And that auto pay is something that would be wonderful if it could be actually automated. So with that, that's going to lead me right into my handoff to Zach Gleason with BillingTree. And Zach, he's going to walk us through all the important things to know when it comes to pharmacy payments.
Thank you, Jamie, for that excellent overview of the statement and payment process for pharmacies and the workflow enhancements. As Jamie mentioned, my name is Zach Gleason with BillingTree, and I'm a senior sales rep here with the company. And this kind of segue where Jamie had mentioned here is we're going to focus on discussions surrounding those recurring payments, which also we call autopay. And before we go into how we can discuss enhancements and improvements to those autopays, let's talk about the pain points first. So today, many pharmacies are manually processing credit cards and check payments each month for patients who have agreed for the pharmacy to auto debit their account. So as Jamie mentioned, you may consider this to be an auto pay in quotes, but in theory, you still have a lot of manual processes that you have to do. And those manual processes may include and also factor into increased staff time. So again, you're having your staff having to go to a terminal to process payments every single week, every single month, which then also results in numerous key entry errors, which can therefore then lead into many credit card declines. And we're finding in the credit card space that when there's manual processes involved, we find there's going to be upwards of 5 to 10% of overall credit card declines via that manual process. Also, the big factor here I'll talk about, we'll get into PCI compliance here in a bit, is the fact that many of these processes you have in place today with autopay or recurring transactions do not have a compliant PCI factor into it. So people are storing credit cards in a safe or a vault, not in a secure, compliant manner. And also, there's many processes involved with processing the credit card and then going to your core pharmacy software, and then having to update that account to update the balance in the system. So there's a very manual process that's really taking the load off onto your workforce. And then also, obviously, redundancy on a daily and monthly basis. So just when you finish your payments for auto pays, up comes another month. You have to go into and do the same thing over and over every single month. So let's talk about the solution. How can you make life easier for your staff and for your pharmacy and your business in general? So I always like to say, set up and let go. And when we talk about auto pays, that whole model is basically considering technology that will automatically trigger the payments each month. So I'm not talking about having to go to a terminal and manually type in credit card information every month. How about a system that can actually trigger automatically with no human intervention and do things like set up a frequency? And those frequencies can trigger a payment based on a due date on the actual patient statement, or maybe upon receipt of the statement that was produced for that patient, or maybe a certain number of days after receipt, or maybe even before a due date. Making sure that you're giving flexibility to your patients to create that plan, or for your staff to create the plan that best matches that patient's payment history. Also, how would you like if you can actually trigger the exact amount of the statement balance every month? Not a certain set amount up to $100, for example, but let's say the entire statement balance every month. Wouldn't that save time? Wouldn't that make life easier? Because we know that there is a large number of recurring billing in the pharmacy space. Whereas one month your patient statement may be $110, the next month it may be $115. So that statement balance fluctuates over time. So making sure you can actually trigger the exact amount of that statement balance every single month is going to be a key factor in the success of obtaining that payment. Also, you can also set limits. Maybe you have patients that want to only pay a certain amount per statement. It's very important to, again, give flexibility to the patient to pay how and when they can. Also, create installment plans. There may be instances where a patient of yours has financial hardships. They can't pay their balance every month in full. Maybe they have a larger balance due to increased services they receive from you. And you want to make sure your patient can be put on an arrangement that satisfies that payment. Maybe not in the terms that you would think of in a normal situation, but maybe a case-by-case basis where you have to support that patient with some financial hardship incentive. Also, making sure it's very easy to set up, edit, and delete those plans. So that's going to be both for your internal staff and for your patients to have the self-service tools to maintain, edit, and delete those plans as they should. And if you look to the right here, you'll see some examples of the payment recurring features offered. And again, those frequency terms can be set forth individually by the pharmacy, making sure that, again, it meets your business rules. The end dates can be by a certain date, number of payments, or indefinitely. And also, if you do offer that payment limit, making sure that patient has, again, the flexibility to enter in how much they want to pay every single statement. And the big thing below here, what we're hovering over, is the fact that they can create that wallet account through that secure online portal, or maybe even through a customer service agent at your pharmacy to use for future use. And again, making sure it's going to be in a PCI compliant manner. So continuing on the solution of autopays, again, gonna recap here a little bit, giving your patients the option and flexibility to pay how and when they can for you. In addition to staff, also provide options for your patients to establish their own payment plans. So anything you can give to your patients to pay through a secure portal or create their own arrangement is going to directly impact the workload for your internal staff. Again, lessening that workload for your staff. Giving controls for patients to securely store their credit card or check information on file. Again, piggybacking on that whole credit card security discussion. Making sure both your patients and your staff can securely store their credit card information in the system. Expedite staff time when making payments over the phone. So again, having a stored method of payment on file is definitely going to make sure that your internal team can process payments in a more efficient manner if a patient should call over the phone. Also promoting a more user-friendly experience for your patients. Giving an online portal. Again, giving them a customized branded website where they can go to log into a portal to see their current balance, to set up the payment arrangements, to create the credit card account, things like that. So next we're going to talk about the automation of your posting process. And when I talk about posting process, I'm talking more in line with how you post back to your pharmacy software. Whoever you may be using today for your pharmacy accounting software, it can be very important to see if that software has the ability to auto post. And what that's going to do is remove the burden of manually posting payments to your pharmacy software, again, by implementing what we call the auto postable electronic remit file, also called ERA. You may also hear it as an 835 or a flat file, many different terminologies when it comes to that file. So many pharmacy systems have an import feature built into their system, which allows you to automatically upload all those payments into the system, which therefore can limit all that manual processing and posting into that pharmacy software. So some benefits to that include freeing up staff time. So again, if you can auto import all those payments from the previous business day into your pharmacy software, wouldn't that save your time and energy every single day from having to post manually one by one? Second, reducing posting errors. Every time you talk about manual process, you have to also talk about errors, manual errors. So having an automated approach to posting payments into your pharmacy software will in turn reduce posting errors. And then lastly, updating patient balances in bulk versus one by one. So again, instead of having to go into that system and update the patient balances as those payments come in, what if you had a postable file to automatically import directly into your pharmacy software? All right, next we're going to talk about PCI Compliance. And I always like to talk about what PCI Compliance is first of all, because a lot of IT techie terminology. So it's definitely important to understand what that means. So PCI Compliance is payment card industry standards, which is mandated by the credit card companies to ensure the security of credit card transaction in the payment industry. And in doing so, the compliance aspects include building and maintaining a secure network and systems, protecting cardholder data, meaning your patient's data, maintaining a vulnerable management program, so internal processes and procedures you have in place to prevent credit card identity theft. Also, implement strong access control measures. Regularly monitor and test your networks. So it's important to ensure you are in a secure network internally. And then lastly, maintain an information security policy. Because you never know what's happening internally. If one of the staff members or someone listening over the counter or through the phone is hearing credit card information, it's very important to maintain some sort of controls to limit any credit cards from being breached. So what is the next factor? Why do I need to be PCI compliant? Many pharmacies in particular wonder, if I'm using a vendor today that is PCI compliant level 1, I should be fine, right? The answer is partially no, partially yes. So yes, you can definitely reduce your PCI scope by utilizing vendors that are PCI level 1. But it's also very important to internally abide by PCI regulations, because many businesses assume that because they're small, that they won't fall victim to data breaches. That is completely false. So you definitely have to ensure that you are also some level of PCI compliance in your office. PCI breaches can be costly to organizations and even put them out of business. So there's been many cases out there in the past 5-10 years where companies have actually went out of business because of the cost associated with that breach. And then 40% of pharmacy patients prefer to pay via credit card, so compliance is necessary. So Jamie talked about how the industry has changed from a whole cash check model to people really wanting to pay via the credit card or debit card. So it's going to be very important as your pharmacy grows and adapts and innovates itself that you also abide by PCI compliant regulations. And then lastly here, pharmacies with sensitive health information in their systems need to keep their data secure. So we talk about PCI compliance and you think, oh, it's just involving credit card data, right? Well, no, it's also in how you manage your overall data for your patients in addition to their credit card data, making sure that's compliant in nature. All right, some helpful hints at becoming PCI compliant. You may be wondering, how do I become compliant? What can I do to make sure my pharmacy is in order? So number one, I always like to mention is making sure that you're selecting a payment solution vendor that is PCI DSS level 1 compliant. Ask for proof from them. So ask for their AOC document of being compliant. Have them show proof of that compliance. Second, ensure that your processor offers ways to become compliant. So if you're using a current processor today that is basically the one authorizing your credit cards, make sure they're giving you options to become compliant. If you don't hear that, if you don't see them offering assistance to become compliant, there's something going on elsewhere that you may need to look into who you're currently using today. And then third, implement solutions that store credit and check data in a compliant manner. So as I talked about before with our autopay feature, making sure both your internal team and your patients have a mechanism or technology that they can store those credit cards in a compliant manner. Don't write credit card data or store them in an Excel document. So I've talked to many pharmacies out there today who are going to the vault every month and opening the vault and getting the credit cards out and manually typing into a terminal. That should not be happening. So it's very critical, again, as you want to grow your pharmacy and your business, to ensure that you're using a vendor that offers a way to PCI compliantly store those credit cards. And then lastly, get in touch with a qualified security assessing firm. So again, that's going to be a company that typically is going to be offered as part of your merchant relationship with your merchant processor or bill pay vendor. And an example of that would be Secure Trust PCI Manager. So there's many out there today, but again, one of those is going to be Secure PCI Manager. All right. Next, I'm going to go into the HSA and FSA discussion. Again, many pharmacies today need to have this option available because their patients want to pay via a mechanism of HSA or FSA card. So HSA cards, before we dive into some of the benefits and how to do so, can be defined as where the account holder contributes pre-tax dollars into the account. So the definition of an HSA card is just that. Also, withdrawals are not taxed as long as the money is used for qualifying expenses. That's what an HSA is. Next, we'll talk about FSA cards. So FSA cards are defined as flexible spending accounts. And those type of cards allows employees to contribute a portion of their regular earnings into the account to pay for qualified expenses, such as medical bills or dependent care expenses. And typically, these type of cards are tied to a specific employer or benefit plan. Sometimes balances must be used before the end of the year, otherwise you use them or lose them essentially. So that's the difference between the two types of cards. So going into how can your pharmacy accept those cards moving forward, it's going to be critical, again, that you use a vendor that offers the ability to accept those cards. And in doing so, you also need to make sure that your pharmacy is designated as a medical facility. And that is going to be where we talk about what we call Merchant Category Code, or MCC, which is defined as either 5912 or 5122. So those two different MCC codes represent a pharmacy, which is a healthcare-based MCC code. Third, select a credit card processor that is able to process HSA and FSA. So we talked about that. And then also register your pharmacy with CGIS. So CGIS is an organization where you can actually enroll to basically better alert that your pharmacy is a healthcare-oriented business processing HSA cards or in the need to process FSA or HSA cards. And then also register under the 90% rule. And what does that mean? So what that means is merchants specified that 90% of their gross receipts for the prior tax year consist of items which qualify for eligible medical care under the IRS rules. So essentially that 90% of your business is in healthcare in nature. And then also, this doesn't prevent every HSA and FSA card from being approved, because as you know, cards can be declined due to insufficient funds, or maybe something with their HSA card has never been activated, for example. So it definitely is going to help with your declines overall, but do not think that just because your organization is going to be accepting HSA, FSA, that you're not going to have some declines. Those are going to be happening, again, based on some factors to your patient's card. All right, so some standards in the HSA, FSA denial reasons. So again, some of the reasons for those declines could be card not activated, insufficient funds, for example, non-healthcare items are being purchased, and also miskey or invalid expiration dates. Those are pretty much the four major reasons you see HSA and FSA cards being declined. So now, I always think this is the big one, which we call Legit Script or NADP Pharmacy Safe Pharmacy Program. This is specifically aimed at pharmacies who want to take credit cards either online or over the phone. So why should I certify? So Visa and MasterCard require that all pharmacies that process card not present transactions, that they are certified by an approved certification organization. And again, that could be either Legit Script or NADP.pharmacy. You may be seeing an influx of those. You'll be hearing about that more in the market these days, more so than you did 5 years ago. And basically what this is, it's going to be a program that, again, if you process in a card not present, it's not physically in person, that is considered to be a card not present transaction. So the card isn't physically in your presence. Also, if you process payments online and through the phone, again, the card is not physically present at that time of entry. Then lastly, recurring payments. Recurring payments, again, are going to be a card not present situation where you save a card on file and every month it's going to be processing to the system. So it's going to be critical you understand why you have to become certified in this. So let patients know that you operate safely and legally. Being Legit certified is definitely going to make your pharmacy look and feel as a more safer pharmacy to conduct business in. Your website will be published in a global database that promotes safe pharmacies. So you'll be recognized globally as a compliant vendor to accept card not present transactions. You'll also be able to put a seal on your website that promotes your compliance. which again contributes to the overall success and security of your company. And then lastly, operate under applicable laws and regulations. So again, if you don't have legit scripts or NADP today, it's probably because you were brought on board before the mandate happened. But as we see in the next slide here, it's going to be coming here shortly. And who does it apply to? So is it going to be, you know, maybe you don't have a physical presence. Maybe you're a closed door pharmacy. Not necessarily true. So any size pharmacy, including internet pharmacies, mail order, brick and mortar, local pharmacies with remote dispensing, internet vet type pharmacies, and also sterile compounding pharmacies. The certification does apply to all those types of pharmacies. And is there a fee to certify? Many of my prospects and clients ask this question, and the answer is yes. Typically, any certification program, there is going to be a fee associated to it, and it does vary based on the type of pharmacy you have. But these companies such as Legit Scripts or NADP will charge that fee. And generally, there is an application fee, so an enrollment fee into the system, and also a minimal yearly renewal fee every time you renew that license with them. And then third, the cost of the certification certainly does outweigh the risk of being out of compliance. And also, basically makes your company able to accept credit cards in that compliant manner. So again, it's coming. The certification, as you see here on this next slide, you want to trust that your merchant and bill pay vendor are mandating that you certify. So you want to make sure that who you're using today is questioning if you're certified or if you're coming to be certified. And if you're not today, it is coming down the pike here shortly to become compliant. Many banks and processors are not permitting to underwrite many pharmacies since pharmacies are considered high risk. So it's best to select a bank or processor that can prove they're eligible to board pharmacies. Many processors do not allow pharmacies to be boarded. And it's important to do your research. Make sure that you are doing your diligence to find a processor that is also going to allow you to become a better compliant pharmacy in general. All right, Jamie, thank you for your time.
All right, thanks, Zach. A lot of information there, but a lot of really great information. So to wrap up, Etactics and BillingTree, I'm going to go ahead and stick our email addresses up there. I know that this has gone a little bit long, so if you have any specific questions for either myself or for Zach, you can go ahead and email us directly. Just as a little wrap up, as far as what you can do to streamline your payment workflow, you know, it really is all about those private pay patient statements, and you can really start with streamlining those patient statements. So really making some changes, take a look at your statements and see what can you do to change. What are you getting asked questions about all the time? What is it that you can do to make them less confusing and make your patients really understand so they do start to remit those payments in a more timely manner. Communicate consistently, not necessarily just when you have time. And I know this is a really tough one, especially if you don't have automated processes in place. But if you're doing letters, if you're doing phone calls, things like that, do them in a consistent and uniform basis. That way your clients will know that you are tracking the aging of their accounts and that you know where their aging is and that you are going to keep on them in order to get those payments in a timely manner. Track the aging and then trigger actions. So just to sort of piggyback on the communicate consistently, remove those aging buckets, but use that aging to your advantage. Trigger things like different messaging on those statements. Trigger things like past due notices. Trigger things like phone calls, or again, know your audience and maybe emails or text reminders is what's going to work best for them. Give options for delivery and payments. So print mail might not work for everybody. You may get a better response in having an electronic delivery portal where somebody could log in, view their statement, make a payment. And you know, the other thing to keep in mind with electronic payments, you're going to get that turnaround much quicker, much quicker. And as I mentioned before, you know, I understand that pharmacy management software sometimes aren't able to do all of these things or may not be able to be super flexible. So you might have to reach out to a third-party vendor to make these options available for you. Get a one-stop integrated workflow for statements and payment functions. So, you know, for instance, Etactics and BillingTree, we've partnered for years, allowing our customers to have that one-stop integrated workflow where they can get their statements electronically and pay for those statements all in one area. So whether they're being printed and mailed or delivered electronically, they all have that same ability to make payments or log in, register for electronic delivery as our partnership has gone. Allowing for reoccurring payments or automated payments, taking the air quotes off of automated payments and actually making that an automated format. So every month those payments are triggering in an actual automated format and that they aren't being locked in the upper filing cabinet that you have to go and get each month and manually type in. Make that so it's triggering each month, again, just increasing your cash flow in a more timely basis. Allowing options for one-time payments or even future dated payments. So for instance, you want to make sure that people are paying in a manner that they are capable of. So I may want to go into an online portal to make my payment, but because I don't get paid for 3 more days, I want to go ahead and future date my payment so it can trigger then. So I don't have to remember to come back 3 days from now and make that payment. So allowing some flexibility in that is also going to help with that cash flow. Allowing a PCI compliant space to store credit cards and e-checks via a wallet in a tokenized environment, or just to be able to keep that in a PCI compliant manner. And Zach took some really good time, quite a bit of time to go ahead and explain to us what that PCI compliance is and why it's important to have it. And then having those automated reconciliation reports where once payments are made, to be able to auto post right back into your payment software. So again, that's a great way to eliminate manual processes, really buy yourself some time, things like that. So you know, all great things. And then overall, just having superior compliance. You know, we all know that there's that HIPAA compliance that we're mandated to on a day-by-day basis, and then, you know, with the payments, there's the PCI compliance, and then with the NABP as well as, you know, the legit scripts, getting signed up with those, having that global, being globally recognized as a safe pharmacy. These are all things that you want to be able to promote, be able to show your patients, show your facilities that you have. So once again, on behalf of BillingTree and Etactics, and behalf of Zach and myself, we'd like to thank you for taking time out today to listen to our webinar with payment workflow and the painkiller for 2021. Again, our emails are up there, jtimmons@etactics.com and zgleason@mybillingtree.com. If you have any questions specific for either of us, you can also send questions about the presentation to marketing@billingtree.com. We certainly appreciate your time today and look forward to hearing anything, any questions or comments from anybody. Thanks so much and have a wonderful afternoon.